subhanAllah, we find it certainly in the West, and even in countries throughout the world, in Muslim countries as well, that we're lacking this ghira for our women, this jealousy of our women folk.
It's a kind of protectionism.
Yeah, and sometimes they look upon it as something bad in the West.
They do, yeah.
They say, well, oh, you're jealous for me, or well, you're too jealous, and what's this? This is something.
But there can be a stage where the jealousy becomes a mild form of insanity. You know, if the guy stays in his car all day watching the house.
Yeah.
But the point is taken. Yes, there must be some of this ghira. Ghira.
Yeah, ghira. It's called. Yeah, it's like a jealousy.
Yeah,
it's like a.
And it's something Allah has put in us.
Yeah, it's a fitra. It's part of the fitra. That we, you know, for example, you know, we don't want anybody to harass our women folk, our sisters, and our mothers, and our aunties. You know, and we know the mentality of the male, and this ghira is something beautiful actually. And the Prophet ﷺ commended that and looked actually in disdain, and those people, Allah will not look at some of those people who don't have ghira for their women folk.
That's right.
So we need to be very conscious of this.
One point I'd like to make here, it's a question I get many times, sometimes even from Muslims. They say, look at the top nations, they drink, they eat pork, they you know, are sexually incontinent. What harm, you know, if it's got them on so well? Shouldn't we be benefiting from that advancement?
But has it got them so far?
Well, they're looking at the technological advances.
But we find when we analyse these societies that alcohol is prevalent, that it comes from other evils. It's not just the actual drinking itself. Allah said that there's in it benefit. We know that in the Quran He mentioned that, and that the benefit, or rather the harm, outweighs the benefit. However, it's the results of the alcohol. We know that it breaks up families. It causes, as Allah refers to it, it causes hatred amongst you, enmity towards amongst each other. It causes a person to lose his mind, that he's not in control of his actions, which is a dangerous situation to have in a social environment, whereby people, you're not only affecting yourself, but you're affecting the people around you.
Yeah, we know that. Yeah. I mean, that Alcohol Institute set up by Mrs. Thatcher in the 80s, they concluded that most of the crimes, most of the people in divorce courts, in mental asylums, hospitals, were there because of their own or other people's drinking.
Exactly, and
so
as well, it's causing illnesses, and it's causing a huge amount of money yearly, and taxpayers' money for, you know, and we know this idea of this 24-hour you know, open drinking thing. As the poor nurses, they're crying themselves asleep when they hear things like this, because it just makes their job even more, you know, even more difficult. But the issue is that, and as well as that, we find that it leads to so many other sins. It leads to fornication. How many times do you hear about unwanted pregnancies? Oh, well, it was because I was drunk, I wasn't in control. Yeah. You know, they're using it as an excuse. You know,
stealing.
How great a people would they be if they took this out, alcohol? And we have to understand that this prohibition in the US, it wasn't so long ago.
No.
And we know that
30s, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was not so long ago. Maybe 70 odd years ago or 80 odd years ago. So. They know that the harm in it. It's not. There's no doubt about that. And having said that, just to go on to the issue about preservation of honor and family and lineage, these are very, very important in Islam. And Islam looks at the family unit as the core, essential element in a society. You have strong families, you have strong societies, and that's why when you look at the Sharia as a whole, it's very much in protection, and it is in, if you like, it aids the family unit in so many ways. You find that, for example, that not only the family but the honor, and us as Muslims and our rights as Muslims over Muslims, we'll deal with later on, that as a family you have the rights within each other. For example, even things like inheritance, that, for example, when it comes to inheritance, that the children get equal amounts. Obviously there's a differentiation between men the boys and the girls, but the differentiation is there for a reason, because in Islam we believe that the man, he takes care of the women.
He has to foot the bills.
He has to put the bills at the end of the day, and that's the issue about the another right over the husband, over the wife, and the wife over the husband. Again, if we have more time, we will try and talk about that. But we find that also Allah Azza wa Jalla refers to says to the believers, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la yaskhar qawmin min qawmin. Don't mock one another, people. Asa an yakunu khayran minkum. Maybe they're better than you, and maybe the women who you criticize and say, maybe they're better than you as well. And don't insult each other with names and call each other by nicknames and things which they don't like. This is not good. And respecting one another, Abu Khalid, on a deep level, people around you, your neighbour, the rights of the neighbour, so much so that the Prophet ﷺ said that the angel Gabriel used to talk so much about the rights of the neighbour that he thought they were going to they were due inheritance. We find that the respect goes a lot more deeper than that, not only just to Muslims but non-Muslims as well. We know of a story of Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu. He came home and he found that the family had slaughtered slaughtered an animal for some dinner, and they found that they didn't offer the Jewish neighbour. So he was very angry by that. He said, how can you eat this and not give some to the neighbour? So he took it and he brought it there. We saw, the neighbour is so important in Islam, and there's different types of neighbour. You have obviously the relative neighbour who's Muslim and he's a relative and he's close by. You have the Muslim and you have the non-Muslim, but they're all given the rights, Abu Khalid. This is very, very important to recognise. A lot of us in this part of the world, and a lot of us, we don't know our neighbours. I know there's an instance.
This is the high-rise culture, isn't it?
It's all very kind of impersonal.
Yeah.
And you go up and down in the lift, or you walk up and down the stairs, and this is a sign of the times that we don't give salam to one another, or we don't talk. We're not close to our neighbours. And really we should try and do our utmost best to connect with our neighbours, even if it's just something, knock on the door and give salam, how are you, how's everything, and things like that, and ask about them. To us it might seem something small, but to Allah Azza wa Jalla it's something massive and huge. And there's a huge reward there.
I found during my recent illness, my neighbours came round to visit. It's just so nice.
Yeah, I tell you, and you feel a lot better, and you feel safe.
Yeah.
And the issue is about safety. And the Prophet ﷺ said, warned against that person who, the neighbour feels, a sense of fear from. This is not a nice thing to have.
From his tongue or his hand.
Exactly, yeah. So we find that this is certainly the case, that Islam protects the rights of the neighbour as well. Preservation and wealth, Abu Khalid, we find that certainly now the big fitna, or the biggest fitna in some instances, is wealth, money. And Allah Azza wa Jal speaks about money and how to spend money. Islam, Abu Khalid, doesn't encourage us to be stingy, nor does it encourage us to be extravagant. There's a beautiful balance there.
Way.
There's always a balance there. Give everything its right, like we said at the start. أعطي كل ذي حق حقه. Give everything its right. It's time to give zakah or sadaqah, give zakah and sadaqah. And be generous. And the Prophet ﷺ was the most generous to his family. And the Prophet ﷺ said that not, anyone who spends for his wife, even if it's a morsel of, food, for Allah's sake, then Allah will reward it immensely on the Day of Judgment.
Look at that.
So every time you, and that's why the issue even of marriage and husband and wife, that it's bringing so much barakah. You're spending actually, but you're getting deeds for your spending. A lot of us think, it's money, and I'm not going to get that back now. Or whatever. No, this is Allah Azza wa Jalla's promise that we will get rewarded for that.
Yeah. The example is given in the Quran, isn't it, about the ear of corn. You plant a seed, produces an ear. Each ear has 100 grains.
Yes.
And so forth.
Exactly. So it's not, nothing will go astray. Everything is counted, and Allah Azza wa Jalla will replace it with that which is even better. We have even the issue of, we said, the rights of the parents, but also the rights of the children, Abu Khalid, are very, very important. That a lot of us think, the children, they have no rights, they just should do what the parents tell them to do. No, this is not the case. We know the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in a hadith that you will be called by your father's names, your names, or your father's names. So what does that suggest? We should give good names to our children, and that's the right that the child has.